Hello, and welcome to the Science on 7th live stream, a virtual space where we talk about topics related to air quality and health around the world. I'm your host, Pallavi Pant. Here we are in December 2024. What a year it has been in many respects, but even in the context of air pollution. We've seen progress in many parts of the world this year. We've seen areas that have really needed attention. And if I can just pull up a map that can help us track where some of those things have happened in different places, all the way from Kazakhstan to Brazil to India, we've seen air pollution episodes that have impacted millions of people. From places ranging from Uganda to the US, we have seen progress on air quality standards. And in places like London in the UK, we have seen new efforts to try and connect air quality information with people's health information at the clinical level and at the clinic scale. So clearly, there has been a lot of focus, a lot of attention on the issue of air pollution. Earlier this week was also the anniversary of the London smog episode that happened decades ago and led to a lot of clean air action that followed. And a few weeks prior to that, people both in India and in Pakistan experienced extreme levels of air pollution exposures, reminding us that those problems have not gone away. So today, I'm very excited to be welcoming Martina Otto, who heads the Secretariat for the Climate and Clean Air Coalition and comes here today with over 3 decades of experience in working on environmental policies and management. And I'm looking forward to discussing the year that has been and the year that's looking ahead. So, welcome, Martina. Very excited to have you here with us today.
Hello, Pallavi, and it's a pleasure to be with you today.
Amazing. So, let's start with this, really broad question, which I think we tend to answer a lot of times. But one more time for our audience, why do we need action on clean air? Why is it necessary for us?
Well, thanks, Pallavi. And I think your slide already gave it away, but it really is a major public health emergency. It causes respiratory and heart diseases, and it even affects the unborn. It has become the second largest factor of death in 2021. So it comes even before tobacco. I think that's something that should stick in our minds. It's causing 8.1 million premature deaths annually, globally. I personally like to talk more about the effects on health and well-being than the premature death. That's always a little bit harder to grasp. It's something that the statistical departments have come up with, and it's good to compare and so on. But it really is something that matters to all of us every day. And if you have really bad episodes where it means you can't go out, children can't go to school, you can't do any sports and so on, that brings it home very much. It's also a health cost. 5 trillion annually due to pollution-related health issues. There's something about lost days at work, about productivity. It shaves off some 6% of GDP. And maybe just to home in as well, and your slide really was telling, it affects all of us. 9 out of 10 people do breathe air that's not safe. But we don't all breathe the same air. And that makes it also an issue of social justice. People in low and middle income countries are exposed much more, between 1 and 4 times to PM 2.5. We see it within cities. It's almost to the level of you tell me your postcode and I tell you how many months of life you're losing. And it's about vulnerable people, the elderly, children, and those with pre-existing health conditions. And it's not only that. There's a real interaction between air pollution and climate. And you mentioned the wildfires already. There is a feedback loop, a negative feedback loop that we need to have an eye on. And the same goes actually for impacts on food. So in all, it's a real sustainable development issue with social, environmental, and economic facets. It's something we must address, but it's also something we can address because we know where to take the action. We have solutions, something we all, with our daily decisions, we can actually do something as well. And a lot of places have shown how much is possible. And you mentioned London smog. I mean, London is a prime example where we saw, 65% of air pollution drops since 2016, just to mention that. And that's not the only case. Beijing, also 60 some percent in PM. So it's doable.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like your, emphasis on the health and well-being part because my parents live in Delhi, and over the last few weeks, every single conversation has been make sure you're not leaving the house, make sure you have, air purifiers on, but it's also because A, they can afford to not leave the house. They can afford to have air purifiers that they can keep on. But it is that, feeling of like, how many days can I stay inside the house? It doesn't make sense. I need to get out and I need to experience, life. So it is clearly a big issue. And as you mentioned, there has been progress, lots of progress that we can look at and learn from. And the organization that you head, the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, has been at the forefront of some of those, progressive solutions and implementation of those solutions. So, for our audience, can you please tell us a little bit more about what CCAC is, the type of work it does?
Okay, absolutely. The CCAC stands for Climate and Clean Air Coalition. We're housed within the UN Environment Programme. We are a partnership of over 90 countries, also bringing together some of the other UN sister agencies, the multilateral development banks, and an NGO community as well. And we take, as the name says, we take a nexus approach. We work at the intersection between climate and clean air. And that's basically for three key reasons. One is because science tells us they're interlinked. So it's in the end one atmosphere. It's also from a very practical perspective, what we ask to happen in certain sectors. Actually, a measure can do good on both sides. So we get a double dividend. So that's very good, particularly at times of financial shortages and so on. It's good to have measures that give you a double dividend. And the third is really that we can play between political priorities. And depending on the place, one or the other topic carries it away. And it's good to have both aspects. Now, a real strength is that we work on science, that we work on the advocacy component, really building up political will. But we also have a trust fund through which we directly support countries with capacity building, institutional strengthening, and so on. And maybe just to bring home very much that, well, we've been in existence till 2012, and at that time, it was very much about the pre-2020 ambition in the climate context. So before everybody would put into place everything that's needed for the just energy transition, we would harness what we would think of being the low-hanging fruit. Now, since we haven't been as fast as we should have on the just energy transition and other climate mitigation measures, the short-lived climate pollutant angle that we take is the emergency brake. And that's because these very specific pollutants that we look at, so that's methane, black carbon, tropospheric ozone, and the hydrofluorocarbons, they all have in common that they have a shorter lifetime in the atmosphere, but a higher warming potential than CO2. And that means if we act on them quickly, they're not not cumulative. Sometimes it's difficult. And that means we can curb the curve of warming faster, which obviously is a key factor at this point in time when we look at possibly overshooting 1.5 and the need to reduce the risk of hitting climate tipping points. And obviously, the multiple benefit story is absolutely critical so that we can actually have a positive impact on things like food security, energy security, but also really the health aspects through the clean air angle. And we really work on the key sectors here, and that's fossil fuels, agriculture, waste. We look at cooling. We look at heavy-duty vehicles and engines and household energy. So those are the activity areas in which we're putting our focus.
Yeah, that's such an amazing spread of sectors, and I'm sure over the years of CCAC's work, there have been multiple examples of working with governments, working with other UN agencies that has resulted in important changes. Because a lot of times when people look at these problems, it's always like, well, The governments know what the solutions are. Why aren't they just acting on them? Why aren't they just, putting them into place? And I would love to hear your experience in terms of both some success areas where changes have been brought about, and then, the types of challenges that governments really face when they're trying to make these decisions or when they're trying to implement these changes.
Yeah. And well, indeed, I mean, over the years there have been quite a few examples. One is, and just playing with this idea of, well, we have science, then the political will, and then the projects to help implement at the country level. And here, one example is what we did with the global methane assessment. And for all those who follow us and think, why is she now talking about methane if everybody talks about this being the climate, a climate angle? But it's not only a climate angle. Methane is a precursor to tropospheric ozone, which we know as, well, in the end, it's about photochemical smog, not the one that we experienced in London, but a different type, but similarly really, really bad for health. So that's why methane is also relevant on air quality, and from an air quality and a health impact side. So global methane assessment, we put that out with our scientific advisory panel. And our reports usually look at what's the problem, how big is the problem, what can we do about it, and it's very solution oriented. It puts out a number of measures that can be taken very pragmatically to take action. And based on that report, we saw the rise of a commitment, the Global Methane Pledge, and that's something that was driven by the two co-conveners, the US and the EU, and has been joined by now 159 countries to reduce methane voluntarily globally by 30% by 2030 from 2020 levels. And that's an example of how a scientific report can actually have huge impact in terms of taking commitment. And now what we have seen is a lot of scaffolding has been put into place. That means regulation, and we see that, for example, with the two co-conveners, the Inflation Reduction Act, IRA, of the US, but also what the EU is doing on the trade side and using the trade muscle to get to emission reductions. And that's quite, just to mention two examples, that's quite interesting. And what we have done on the CCIC side is we've supported countries directly with the inclusion of methane and other short-lived climate pollutants into the nationally determined contributions. So again, climate jargon. But also to take action on key sectors. So looking at waste, what actions can be taken there, and that ranges from a ban on open burning of waste, which is highly relevant for health as well, but really also the methane actions to reduce organic waste in the first place, and addressing landfills and so on. So we've done quite a bit of support in countries with regard to that. So that's one example. And maybe another example is we've done an assessment of an integrated assessment, climate and clean air for Africa, so a regional one. And that came out also with regionally targeted measures. And one of the findings was that this is a region that does not yet have an air quality agreement or a program. And while in other regions that does exist. And we've worked that through different fora like the African Union Commission and AMSEN, which is a meeting of environment ministers. And now we're working on remedying this to set up an Africa Clean Air program. And you asked me, what do I see in terms of challenges faced by governments? One is awareness. And for methane, clearly it was about making the invisible visible. With the satellite imagery showing us where the plumes are and so on. But for air quality, we often see it, right? It's right in our face, so it's not as visible. But it's still about how big the problem is. And here the monitoring, the data helps us greatly. The second is we can't assume only because we know that it's a big problem that we have population coming along. Some measures are really hard. Some also take a little bit longer to show results, and that's difficult in our short political time spans. And if we look at something like the low emission zones in London, coming back to the London example, that was highly relevant in the last elections, for example. So it is an issue of tension, but once people have bought into it, and in this case, it was actually Mums for Lungs, for example, that showed how important that topic is, so that people would actually go and say, oh yeah, maybe I have to do something, I have to play my part in this as well. A key issue is capacity and the institutions. Another one is really this multi-level governance. So I did talk about London, but then obviously there's a UK Clean Air Act as well. So it's how this interplay is between the different levels of governance, and the last bit is finance. That's a real stumbling block as well. Maybe I stop with that and we dig deeper as we go.
Yeah, no, this is amazing. I think that the methane work and also the work that you mentioned with the integrated assessment in Africa have been really pivotal in terms of moving the conversation on a particular track. So clearly, science is important, but you ended the challenges piece with the note on finance, which often is the place where a lot of critical bottlenecks tend to come up either in early stages or even if you implement solutions. As financing goes away, there may not be opportunities to continue it, especially in low and middle income countries. And I've been very encouraged and excited to see the CCAC launch the Clean Air flagship at the Climate and Clean Air Ministerial in 2023. It is focused on air pollution, which is amazing. And can you tell us a little bit more about the flagship and what you think CCAC would like to achieve with this flagship program?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Pallavi. And it really, I mean, for us, flagships are a way to lift attention and to rally the entire partnership behind a topic. And before the Global Methane Pledge existed, we actually had a methane flagship, which allowed us to build up the momentum politically as well, and allowed us at the same time to be ready for implementation when the Global Methane Pledge was there, and we then became the place for the Secretariat services to that pledge. So that's what the flagship per se can do. And in this case, it was really to make sure we put emphasis on the importance of clean air, and that we don't forget in the whole hype around climate and the methane work, that we don't forget all the other pollutants as well, and the clean air topic. And here we really worked with an amazing community, bringing in the collective wisdom, the power of the partnership in a sense, with our Clean Air flagship task team. So that really was across UN agencies, also bringing in the economic commissions, but people like yourself and so on, to really define how to move the needle in this. And we came up with 5 priority areas. One is around regional cooperation regulation, the other one on science, and something on the private sector engagement. We look at advocacy and finance. And what we really want to, or a few things that we have in the pipeline that we really want to move, and we did have to say, well, there's a huge program, we have to go bit by bit. And so for the first year of this, we put an emphasis on how can we change the paradigm, that we don't take, oh yeah, clean air, or air pollution is what happens while we industrialize, while we develop economically. No, clean air or air pollution is not something we have to put up with. There are technologies out there that work, and clean air is really an asset. Now, that's why we put together this economic case. There's a study that will come out that looks at the cost of inaction, but also cost of actions to enable us to compare a little bit. We put into place scaffolding to drive down pollution, and we really hope that we get to that we can see pollution going down with this. Air quality management exchange platform to help build capacity, and maybe I leave it at that right now, but really to help people to grapple with the issue. I mentioned regional cooperation and the importance of that, the Africa Clean Air program that we do. But also really at the country level, work with on air quality standards, on sector policies, and maybe here an example from the past is we helped with the East Africa Fuel Quality Standard, and And that really helped. So that's something maybe as well for all of us to think, air quality, it has to trickle down in a number of key sectors, and transport obviously is one of them. And one is fuel quality, and the other is vehicle standards, and then obviously investing in public transport. But that was sort of a prime area to build up as well. Again, some political will, but also to see countries working together, because together they have a bigger market impact as well. So it makes sense to do that, and that's something we try to drive further with this Clean Air flagship, putting the finger on those key topics. I stopped beforehand with finance, should have probably said something about finance as well. And here we look at how we can come up with criteria so that the finance players have to reckon with air quality outcomes. So they have to plan for them. So if we see climate finance, how can we optimize certain measures that we have better air quality outcomes? And I think that can be pretty powerful as we go forward.
Yeah, no, I think, those are all great objectives. And I think a lot of people are rooting for the flagship to be successful and lead to impact. And the piece that you just mentioned also about sectoral intervention, sometimes, we get sort of this kind of tunnel vision that, oh, we're working on air quality and we need to program and position everything as air quality. But we have seen success in many places where it's just been a sectoral intervention that has gone through, resulted in improvements in air quality and many other improvements on other avenues as well. So hopefully this work will also build up on some of that. We've also seen this year a number of reports that again highlight how important air pollution is as a global issue, as a local issue. We at HEI released the State of Global Air report. I think we have an image. You already cited some of the statistics, so I will not repeat them. But the fact that air pollution is really ranking as one of the leading risk factors for poor health, and in many countries as the most important risk factor. Similarly, the World Heart Federation released a major global report talking about the impacts of air pollution on cardiovascular health. I mean, many of us have people in our families that are living with cardiovascular health, and we're thinking of issues like smoking and diet and physical activity, but air pollution is really up there as one of the risk factors. So thinking of all the things we've seen in 2024, and knowing that there are these huge impacts on health and well-being, what would emerge to you as some hopeful messages or standout wins related to air quality action at any level, government advocacy, that you would like to take with you and also share with the audience for the next years?
Yeah. I mean, one thing, and obviously if we talk air quality, there's indoor and there's outdoor, and just making a reference to what happens indoors with the clean cooking, I think is, I mean, it's a disgrace that we're still talking about people lacking access to clean cooking devices. And here there has been a major milestone with an event on really driving this, and seeing how we can get people actually to e-cooking. So not only small improvements in efficiencies of stoves, but really all the way. And they rallied quite a bit of money, 2.2 billion. So that gives me hope as well. So putting an emphasis on a specific topic and putting some money behind it. So political will and that. A second one is, and technically that was not this year, but still the year before. So that was at COP28, but it was December, so I make an exception here. There was a health declaration at COP, and that meant it broadened the community. So we have the health community coming into the climate discussions and really driving forward the topic. So 123 countries signed that declaration. Health ministers were at the table, and I think this is really helping us to maximize those health gains from climate action, and that's something I really hope and carry through for next year as well. We had a UNEA resolution as well. UNEA stands for UN Environment Assembly, where all the countries come together at the Ministries of Environment level, and that saw a resolution really targeted at regional cooperation on air quality, and I think there's that will keep us definitely busy as well for next year, and I think will help as well with rallying up the support for action. I think that's really
Yeah,
the
no, those are, I think those are all pretty powerful and, inspirational things for us to carry forward. And one of the things that you've referenced here, and several of our previous guests have also talked about, is that there is a need to drive action at different levels. There's often also an acknowledgement for this action, but perhaps not the right infrastructure, perhaps not the right kind of information that can help you make those decisions if you're very early starting to think about air quality management, or at an advanced stage and you're thinking about what do we do next. We've done the basic foundational steps. And what has been interesting is this emergence of the air quality management exchange that you already referenced a little bit in your work. And we saw the first version of the AQMX launch earlier this year, and we have just a snapshot from that if we can pull it up. But how do you see this resource? And of course, this is a resource that is dynamic and will continue to evolve and expand. How do you see this resource help cities and help countries in moving forward on action on clean air?
Yeah. We had identified that capacity was amongst the key barriers to taking more action. And so this is an intended response to that. It provides hands-on guidance and a resource library for air quality managers. So it's very targeted. And we've split it up in key areas, so ranging from air quality monitoring to source apportionment to health impact assessment to decision support and so on. I won't mention them all. I encourage everybody to have a look. And we split things up in different stages. So what we have at the moment is stage 1 guidance, how we call it. And that's for those where there's little to no capacity in place to take action on this. And over the next year, not only are we running training workshops on what is out there already, but we will build also the guidance for stages 2 and 3. We work on model legislation. We will work on setting up communities of practice where they don't exist yet, and that can be regional, that can be a local government community practice as well. And we will help with sector pitches and how the air quality and different sector measures work together hand in hand. So that's something we will look at. So watch that space. It will be a lively, vibrant area.
Yeah, absolutely. I would also encourage everyone listening to definitely take a look. It's made for air quality managers, but there's lots of information and resources that you can find useful in whatever work we do. And one of our listeners was also curious about your thoughts on how to engage people locally in air quality programs, and any suggestions or ideas you might have for them.
I mean, one is about engagement in the data situation. So the monitoring, there's a lot of low-cost sensors out there nowadays. Even mobile phones can help with doing that. So building up the data is definitely one. And here's even an opportunity as well. I mean, if we look at waste pickers and so on, how to actually involve those as well. Another is around the advocacy and the motivations to act, and really telling the story how every daily decision making actually can make a difference. And then it's co-creation in terms of the policies that are out there as well. So proper stakeholder mapping and meaningful engagement definitely are areas.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And, I know we're coming close on our time here, but a lot of people that come to this live stream have had such fascinating paths into air quality work. And I love to hear what your journey has been. You trained as a lawyer, you worked with so many different interdisciplinary teams over your career. And how has that experience been for you? Can you share maybe a couple of lessons or insights, pearls of wisdom that you can share with some of us who are figuring this out?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I trained as a lawyer, and getting into the space of the motivation really is to defend those who don't have, or at least not enough of a voice. So that is true for nature. That's true for vulnerable people. And there we go. And you mentioned, yes, I've been working internationally for well, now quite some time. And it's been super gratifying to work in a multidisciplinary and a multicultural environment. And what is interesting is we don't have the same codes, we don't speak the same language. And here I mean not only by literally the language, but also we're trained in a way how much our studies actually shape how we think. And so we don't have the same codes between someone who's an engineer, someone who's an anthropologist. I mean, and bringing all that together is super powerful. Sometimes it slows things down, clearly, because we don't have the immediate recourse. But in the end, it makes things much more creative and also more on target. So it's absolutely worth doing it. And in the environmental field, clearly, where everything is so interconnected, having those different aspects coming together is essential to have all hands on deck. And now, I guess, working in the space, you have to be an uncurable optimist. And there's a tension between the impatience that you have to drive the action and having to be patient to see results. Some of the deep changes that we need are decadal. So once you've been really holding out there and have done your bit, you see that only then. So don't lose patience and don't lose the stamina to drive things forward. It's worth it. And maybe the last bit is the importance of communication and how we present things. And I got into that a little bit on, what makes people tick to make a change, telling that story. And I think here the example is in climate, we just got it wrong when we started talking about, the end of the decade. And so people are like, that's far away. It doesn't concern me. If we had told the story, climate is about not getting to those 3 degrees, but staying within a 1.5 and say, well, we all know that when we have a little bit of a fever, 1% temperature, 1 degree temperature, 1.5, we still function. We feel crappy, but we function. Once we hit the 40, we're in bed and nothing works anymore. And 40.5, system shuts down. It's exactly the same thing because we're a piece of nature. And it's that story. How do we get people motivated to take action and to make it understandable? I refer to, sometimes there's jargon and we have to be better at doing that. That's another, it's definitely a piece of advice. But don't lose hope. I think that's really the key thing. Do what you can. The hummingbird story, even if the forest is on fire, bring your drop of water. In the end, it does make a difference.
Yeah, no, those are all really powerful messages. And I think that, the message around patience is so critical because I remember early on in my career, I definitely was the person who thought, well, you do this, you're going to see change and things will be better. And I'm very grateful that, one of my very dear friends, gave me that lesson early on that you are not going to see change that you want to see immediately, but that doesn't mean you stop working on it. You have to keep going and eventually you will find that change happening around you. So I would absolutely echo that. And then also what I'm taking away from this conversation is not only the fact that there is a lot of forward momentum and action towards improving air quality. There's also growing appreciation for not thinking in silos of, trying to bring things together. So lots of opportunities for us to do work collectively at different scales, across regions, across cultures. So thank you so much, Martina. This was amazing. We really appreciate all of the work you do and also for being here, all of the work that CCAC does. And we look forward to continuing this work together. So thanks again for joining us today. And everybody listening in, a very big thank you to you as well for joining us today and for being with us throughout the year. This is our final episode for 2024, and we will be back now in February 2025. So until then, we hope you have a joyful festive season. You get some time to take a break, relax and rejuvenate, and let's keep working towards those clean air and blue skies together. Thank you very, very much.